let's just give it a few more minutes for folks to join the webinar, and then we'll get started. Okay, I think we're about ready to get started here. I would like to welcome you all to the GoGreen Business Program Public Workshop. We're going to be describing some of the new regulatory changes that we are planning to make to the program, and we would love to have input from folks in the industry, which is why we have invited you all. My name is Jonathan Verhoof, and I'm going to be presenting today with my colleague Kevin Nakano. And we're going to be describing some of our regulations changes, and we'll have plenty of opportunity for input from the group. And with that, I would like to hand it off to Kevin.
Thank you, Jonathan. My name is Kevin Nakano. I'm an analyst with the GoGreen Business Program, and here along with Jonathan to discuss the proposed modifications to regulations. In our next slide, we wanted to let everyone know we have live caption is available, and here are the instructions for that. And then in our next slide, just our information. And then also, if you have questions or comments, for the questions, please type your question into the chat box or click the button to raise your hand and we will unmute you. And the unmute's a little tricky it's different than Zoom on Teams. So once we unmute you, then you'll have to then click your microphone on so then you can talk. So we'll work through that if there's a problem with that. And then the slides will be available at this link shown on the bottom right-hand corner of the slide here. And our next slide talks a little bit about how our structure is set up. And yes, we will put the link. Jonathan, do you think you can copy and paste that a workshop slide link into the chat box?
Sure.
Yeah, and then in this slide here, it just talks about the structure. CATFA is housed at the State Treasurer's Office. CATFA administers the chief program, aka GoGreen Financing, and the GoGreen Financing program is divided into 3 specialized programs: GoGreen Home, GoGreen Business, which Jonathan and I are with, and then GoGreen Multifamily. And then the California Public Utilities Commission created chief to bring private capital to energy efficient financing and authorize CATFA as its administrator. Okay, and the next slide. We'll tell you a little bit about how GoGreen Business leverages private capital for energy efficient upgrades. The program's credit enhancement comes in the form of a loan loss reserve and allows private financing companies to offer great terms, like no security against real property. They do secure the equipment through UCC filing. They offer lower interest rates, longer payback terms to make the monthly payment smaller, larger financed amounts, and broader customer credit approvals, which means that the businesses or nonprofits can have shorter time to business, no borrowing history, and some of our lenders can help sectors that are, I guess, traditionally a little bit more difficult to qualify, like restaurants, cannabis growers, and houses of worship. Financing is for-profit and nonprofit businesses, including multifamily that meet one of these three definitions for small business. It's 100 or fewer employees, annual revenues of less than 15 million, or if they meet the SBA small business size requirements for their sector. And the most popular measures that have been installed so far are the HVAC systems, LED lighting, refrigeration, and insulation, which is often referred to as building envelope. In the next slide, we're going to talk a little bit about what the workshop will address. This presentation is going to be highlighting the most significant additions and changes. Text cleanup and clarifications are not covered today and can be viewed in the red line document, which the link is provided here below. And I can ask Jonathan to put the link in the chat for everybody.
It's the same link that I already provided.
Oh, you did? Okay, sorry about that.
Regulations page, yeah.
Okay. Let's see. So next slide, we talk about proposed modifications to expand GoGreen Business program. So noteworthy modifications and additions that we are going to be covering today. We're going to be expanding measure eligibility beyond energy efficiency with new measures such as solar generation, battery storage, EV chargers, and more. We're going to combine the GoGreen Affordable Multifamily Program into GoGreen Business, including a larger loss reserve for deed-restricted multifamily. We're going to add the ability to include alternate sources for funding for the program, add the ability to offer interest rate buy-downs through the program, and additional changes also have been made since draft regulations were originally published. So the updated draft regulations will be available today. In the next slide, regulation modification anticipated timeline. So this is a high-level overview of the different important dates. Public comment period closes at 5 p.m. on April 2nd, so please keep that in mind. And then April 16th, we're going to be presenting the regulations to the CAFA board for approval. On April 19th, CAFA is going to post notice of emergency regulations and follow with regulations package to OAL. And then on May 7th, we're hoping that the emergency regulations will be adopted. We definitely want your input, so please provide any comments during this workshop or afterwards by April 2nd, 5 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. Comments can be submitted via this email here, and maybe Jonathan can put that in the chat. CAFA will consider all comments and incorporate them as appropriate. And then the modified GoGreen Business regulations are available at this link, which I believe was already put in the chat. In terms of our workshop agenda, for the next slide. These are the different topics that we're going to be going over. The first agenda topic, clean energy measures through qualifying through PE certification, is going to be the clean energy measures portion of our presentation. And then the following items are going to be regarding some of the other changes that we're making to the regulations. And the next slide, we're going to talk about analyzing clean energy measures. So adding clean energy measures. So CAFA utilized a 9-point benefits test analyzing the impacts of any given proposed measure. And this methodology was approved by the California Public Utilities Commission. The methods of qualification Unlike GoGreen Home, which is another program under GoGreen Financing, we have more than one method of qualification as noted here. Subsequent slides will show measures we considered adding to the pre-qualified list, but the measures on these slides, even those that fail to demonstrate adequate benefits, may still qualify via another method, like through the IOU programs or PE-CEM methods that we will be discussing further in subsequent slides. The GoGreen Business Program has multiple methods by which energy measures may qualify. We have a pre-qualified eligible energy measures list, up to 350,000 in non-lighting measures. It also includes a broad category for IOU demand-side energy management programs. Another way to qualify is through a professional engineer or certified energy manager certification. An energy professional may certify the benefits for any financed amount, but is required for non-lighting projects over 350,000. As this list can only qualify non-lighting measure, the pre-approved list can qualify non-lighting measure projects up to 350,000. Some of the clean energy measures we considered, such as CHP, microgrids, and anaerobic digesters, may require the PE CEM pathways anyways because of the cost. Next slide, we're going to start to show you the matrix for the 9-point benefits test, and we're going to talk about the clean energy measures that we are considering. So this matrix, we're evaluating the 9 points benefits test, and this is how we're showing this through this matrix. And it's with respect to the impacts to 3 potential beneficiaries: customers, utility companies, and society. As you can see in the matrix, not all measures added value to all 3 stakeholders. For example, the standalone solar PV did not qualify as benefits are reduced without battery storage. California already has an abundance of solar generation when the sun is out. And what is needed is the ability to address peak demand when the grid is relying on sources that produce the most greenhouse gas emissions. And the measure that did pass was solar and battery storage combined because it provided benefits to all 3 beneficiaries: customers, bill savings and stability, utilities, peak reduction, and then society emissions reductions. And so also on this slide are battery storage without generations. And you can see that we passed it with requirements for load shifting, virtual power plants, energy arbitrage. And then standalone solar-powered equipment like streetlights that have a solar and battery component built in, and that provided benefits to all 3 categories. And so we passed that. On the next slide, we have a list of additional measures. The smart EV chargers will provide bill savings, compared to the total bills, including gasoline. Peak reduction is achieved by the requirement for smart charging. And for measures which rely on combustion for on-site generation, like CHP and combustion-driven generators, CAFA's evaluation found that the resulting GHG emissions could outweigh other benefits. Gas combined heat and power emissions increase depending on the time of day when CHP operates and the emissions of grid supply that is displaced. So it depends on the utility power generation fuels, like if they're using coal or natural gas or some other type of fuel. In most scenarios in California, CHP will increase emissions since the grid is relatively clean. And CHP fails, but may qualify via other channels like utility programs. And it also may qualify through the PE-CEM method if it reduces greenhouse gas emissions compared to existing conditions. And this is the same for combustion-driven generators, the microturbines, linear generators, so on and so forth. And then we also have microgrid infrastructure that we passed because it had benefited all 3 categories. While some combustion-driven generation technologies are cleaner than others, CAFA chose not to add these to the pre-qualified list due to the possible increase of greenhouse gas emissions compared to other sources of generation. However, these sources of generation may qualify through other methods, which we're going to describe in more detail on subsequent slides. On the next slide, we have additional clean energy measures that we are considering. Anaerobic digestion provides benefits in all three categories, so we passed. Power to gas, hydrogen production through electrolysis. So we will discuss electrolysis used to generate hydrogen on subsequent slides. We would like your input on the potential power sources for this process, which might be beneficial. Do we require green only, like solar and wind, or is yellow sources more beneficial? So, and then we also have wind generation, which is pretty straightforward as well. And at this point, I'll hand the presentation off to Jonathan.
Great, thank you so much for that, Kevin. What I'm going to start doing now is going into a little more detail about each of these clean energy measures that we talked about. And I wanted to kind of reiterate what Kevin was saying, that we considered measures for the pre-qualified list, but because that's not the only way to qualify measures for the Go Green Business program, we might have decided not to put things on the list, but allowed them in with other requirements under a different method. So solar and battery storage is pretty straightforward. We know that it's a win so long as the two are combined together, that we have clean generation in addition to the ability to use that generation at times when the grid is not so clean, such as during peak times. So we do have a requirement in the EEM list, the eligible energy measures list, that solar PV is allowed so long as it's bundled with battery storage. And then we had a separate row in that previous table, which listed standalone solar powered equipment. So this is a type of equipment such as a street light or a well pump, where the equipment comes packaged as a single unit, including generation and storage built into the equipment. And the benefits are pretty clear, as I said. Being able to generate clean energy, the customers can see a significant reduction on their utility bill. And also it provides resiliency for having batteries in place and having a clean source for those batteries to provide backup power in the event of shut off. Battery generation or battery storage without generation is a bit more of a tricky one. There's definitely some favorable elements to this, but there's also some challenges here. For example, we have concern that that the batteries are going to be drawing on the grid or could possibly draw from the grid at a time when generation is not that clean. And there's a little bit of inefficiencies from the energy being stored and then released. So what we said was batteries qualifying through the list either must be paired with existing solar PV or used for load shifting. And that's another one that we already have thermal and mechanical storage allowed in the program for purposes of load shifting as well. We weren't really in favor of allowing battery backup in and of itself because of the reasons that I just mentioned. It could potentially draw from the increased demand at a time when the grid is not that clean. And increase GHG emissions, which is a concern. So we either need clean generation or we need to shift power away from times of peak demand. For EV charging, we're actually adding this as an energy efficiency measure because of the smart capability. We have a smart requirement for Wi-Fi enabled vehicle chargers so that it can be more intelligent on when it draws from the grid and when it's charging the EV. And also it must be Energy Star rated. However, there are Energy Star ratings for level 1, 2, and 3 of EV chargers. So we are allowing all 3. And this is something that California has some pretty ambitious goals in terms of electrifying the fleet of all the vehicles in the state. There's quite a bit of demand for EV. And also the emissions reductions benefits are pretty significant. We are very interested in microgrids. Microgrids are one of the measures that are probably going to be well beyond that $350,000 cap to qualify via the EEM list. However, it is possible that it might qualify this way. But we do have some measures that we added specifically to the list for microgrids, in particular software and controllers and equipment. And we are requiring that these microgrids have a clean energy source, storage, and controls for load management, although it can be grid connected or off grid. This microgrids not only have, with clean sourcing, it helps with the state's clean energy goals, but also adds a lot of resilience to the grid. And also the EV adoption, which we discussed on the previous slide, is going to require quite a bit of infrastructure, and microgrids can help address this, especially in communities where maybe there's not a lot of charging available. So that is another reason why we wanted to include microgrids. And lastly, because microgrids are more local, it also helps reduce grid inefficiencies and losses. Another one that we are very interested in that might not actually be able to be paid for through the list, but we wanted to add it anyways, were anaerobic digesters. This is another one that's a clear win by producing biogas using biological sources. It can displace natural gas in order or generate electricity. And this is just waste that would otherwise be producing methane, which is a huge GHG gas and very impactful. So that's one benefit. And another is you're taking waste and producing power. We considered requiring that the biogas be used on site. And that is one of the questions we have for this group, because we've also received a request that that biogas be available for use off-site. So that would mean either added to the pipelines or otherwise distributed, which means it could be used outside of IOU territory and potentially even outside of California. So that is one of the questions we have for the group. Another one that's a clear win is wind turbines. That is a great way, along with solar PV. That's one of the big ones that we want in California in order to generate clean energy. It can also add stability to the grid when solar is unavailable, either if it's due to cloud cover or at night. And there are small-scale wind generation technologies that are becoming available. They're not too common in America yet, more common in Europe, but it's something that is available, and it could be used much more on a local scale instead of the very large fans that we typically think of when we think of wind generation. And we decided not to add a storage requirement here, unlike solar PV, because wind generation tends to occur at times when solar generation is low. So here's the first batch of questions we have for the group. And as Kevin said, we would like input by Tuesday the 2nd, but people can feel free to provide input now or at another time. One is it reasonable to require that batteries be installed with existing solar PV or be used for load shifting? Are there other applications that we should be considering to qualify batteries through the eligible energy measures list? The second question is, what do you think about the on-site usage requirement? Should we remove that from anaerobic digesters, or should we keep it? Are there concerns that energy be used on site by utility customers? And the third question is, do we need to require battery installation with wind turbines? So I mentioned previously another method of qualifying energy saving measures and clean energy measures through the program, and it is what we call energy professionals. So a professional engineer or a certified energy manager can provide a certification to the program. And this was originally designed for energy efficiency and demand response, which is A and B on this slide here. We originally had language that said that measures being qualified for the financing through the program through this method needed to save energy or help reduce peak demand. However, with clean energy, that became a little bit more complicated, so we added some more requirements here. Requirement C here is each distributed generation measure must produce clean energy with reduced greenhouse gas emissions compared to existing conditions. And that would apply to something like combined heat and power, as we were discussing earlier. We're confident that things like solar generation or wind generation could qualify through this requirement. However, something like CHP might actually reduce the production of greenhouse gas emissions, or it might not. If it's operating at a time, for example, during peak load, and it's offsetting the demand during peak periods, then that could potentially reduce greenhouse gases. Likewise, if it's compared to a time when the grid is very dirty, or it's drawing from the grid, or it's generating as an alternative to production by, say, a coal-fired power plant, then it could potentially save energy due to the local sourcing and also the efficiencies of CHP. The next item is regarding storage, and this is slightly different from what we have on the eligible energy measures list. What we're saying here is that battery storage must either reduce greenhouse gas emissions through load shifting or allow for greater grid stability as part of a virtual power plant, and or mitigate customer costs through energy arbitrage. So we have somewhat expanded criteria here through this method that the engineer or the certified energy manager is going to be certifying to us. And lastly, we have a requirement that hydrogen produced through electrolysis must use renewable energy sources. That is one of the questions that Kevin mentioned previously, and I'll be getting into that a little more on a subsequent slide. So the reason for this approach, in addition to a pre-qualified list, is it gives us a lot more flexibility. We don't necessarily know every single type of measure that's going to be installed, and we don't necessarily know the conditions under which they're being installed. So this is a much more of a custom approach. Also, it's more rigorous than the list. The list is intended to be the easy way to qualify projects. That's why it's allowed for non-lighting projects up to 350,000. Having an engineer sign off on a project and have the strength of their license standing behind it is somewhat more rigorous of an approach, and that's why we're requiring it for larger projects. So with the addition of clean energy measures, we have, in addition to energy savings that the engineer or the certified energy manager is certifying to the program, allowing for peak reduction or load shifting or reduction of greenhouse gas emissions. So it's still a flexible approach to qualify clean energy measures. And lastly, I wanted to reiterate that another way to qualify measures is through the eligible energy measures list. We have a catch-all category that says one of the investor-owned utilities demand-side energy management programs. If they qualify a measure for one of those programs, then we can qualify that through our program. So that would include energy generation program like SGIP. It could include rebates for energy efficiency measures. So it is a fairly broad catch-all category if something does not qualify for the program through other categories on the list. And in addition, we also still have a method of qualification, which is that if something qualifies for the IOU custom program, it can be financed through our program. So measures that might qualify. Oh, go ahead.
Hey, Jonathan. Yeah, I just wanted to, if it's okay, to remind people if they do have a question, they can just raise their hand and we'll call them.
Absolutely, yes. You can put your questions in the chat, or you can feel free to raise your hand, and we would like to hear from you. But if not, like I said, you can feel free to follow up with us later. So measures that might qualify through the energy professional certification, we mentioned electrolysis, power to gas. As described in the previous slide, we're requiring that there's a green source. However, there might be some benefit to allowing for grid supplied electrolysis if it's at a time when there's an abundance of clean energy on the grid in the middle of the day, when a bunch of solar panels are generating. It might actually be beneficial to allow this to qualify for the program, as that will allow us to avoid curtailment and make some use of that electricity that would otherwise be wasted. I already mentioned combined heat and power and how it could qualify through this method. Another one would be combustion-driven generation. I know that there's some demand for microturbines or linear generators and the like, and that they are cleaner compared to other forms of combustion-driven generation. So they could qualify through that catch-all category of IOU demand-side management program through the EEM list, or it could qualify through the energy professional certification. Likewise, battery storage, other than being used other than load shifting, could qualify through this method. And as I said, this method is for projects over $350,000 of non-lighting measures. So large installations of solar PV, wind generation, anaerobic digesters, microgrids are all examples that may go through this method. Now, it is possible that there's some forms of clean energy or generation and storage, as we define them, that are not ones that we have considered that might qualify through this method if they meet the criteria described previously of reduced greenhouse gases, load shifting, mitigating customer costs, etc. So if there's something that we missed, if there's something we didn't consider that might be worth considering or potentially risky if it meets those criteria but still doesn't has some other issues that don't make it clean energy, then we would like to know about that. Here is, oh, we got Robert hand raising his hand. Willie, can you please unmute Robert? And Robert, you also need to unmute yourself once Willie has done so. Maybe I can unmute Robert.
I think he is unmuted. He'll just have to unmute it on his side.
Robert, can you try unmuting yourself? It's the Okay, looks like it's working. Go ahead, Robert.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, sorry. So as contractors and you guys, we understand all these measures that you're talking about, which including hydrogen and the microbes and all that. But do the lenders, the GoGreen lenders, are banks and lending institutions. If we submit projects to them, these kind of esoteric projects like the microbes or hydrogen, will they understand those to the point that they'll be willing to loan for those types of projects?
It really depends on the lender. Some of our lenders are more focused on green energy and are considering forms of clean energy when they are looking at project paybacks. However, we are always available for participating finance companies to help them evaluate and see if they will qualify for the program. And we have our engineering consultant, Energy Futures Group, who also provides us with consultation. If it's something that's beyond our knowledge, we can work with EFG to determine whether something qualifies for the program.
Okay. And then one other measure that I was thinking of, which we actually have had approved by PG&E, is we work a lot in the ag industry with refrigerated warehouses. And there is a measure that PG&E allows, and we have had one approved. Customer didn't proceed with it for other reasons, but this was changing out the dock doors in their loading bay to rapid closing dock doors. And we PG&E ran us through the mill. We had to send a photographer out there at night when they were loading and take infrared photos proving that cold air was leaking from the doors, and they, lo and behold, they approved it. Is that something that GoGreen might recognize as well as an energy saving measure?
That is something that we previously were requested to add to our program, and we have done so. And we've financed quite a few deals with that type of measure. So yes,
Ah,
absolutely.
okay, perfect. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Robert. Okay. And proceeding with the questions I have on the screen here. This is one that's a fairly challenging one to address right now, but I encourage people to have a look at our requirements for the professional engineer, certified energy manager qualification, and the certifications we have. I should point out, in addition to the rules that I showed previously, we are going to be collecting data on projected energy savings and reduction in carbon emissions, so that we are having some quantification of benefits from the professional energy professionals. But we would like to know, are these standards reasonable? Are they sufficient? Are there some risks that we are incurring inadvertently by having these standards, but having them be too open? Are there additional standards we should add? The second question is, what is the demand for gas combined heat and power? We would like to know if people are seeing these types of projects. Um, And if so, how common is this? What's the project size? What are the projected benefits? What are the kind of circumstances under which these are being installed? And lastly, the question I mentioned previously, should we keep this rule that electrolysis be limited to green sources, or do we want to allow grid sourcing as well? Are there benefits through allowing grid-sourced hydrogen? Here I have a slide showing some other energy efficiency measures that we are adding. I'm not going to go through everything here, but I wanted to flag for folks that we are adding a fair bit of new energy efficiency measures to our pre-qualified list. So that covers the segment on clean energy. Next, I'm going to move into another significant program change, which is we have had GoGreen affordable multifamily financing available. And what we have decided to do is to merge affordable multifamily in with the GoGreen Business program. GoGreen Business rules already allowed market rate and affordable multifamily to qualify. The affordable multifamily program had a larger loss reserve. However, what we decided was that there are benefits to merging the two programs together. So the program requirements for affordable multifamily are not changing very much at all. We're putting them in pretty much directly from the existing regulations. The underwriting requirements are being kept the same. The definition is being kept the same. The loss reserve contribution being offered by affordable multifamily is a 30% contribution for the first two projects up to $200,000, and then a contribution of 15% for subsequent projects. That's significantly larger loss reserve contribution than Go Green Business, which offers 20% of the first 50,000 and then 5% of the next 950,000 up to 1 million. However, Go Green Business does have that much larger threshold of financed amount. So the big benefit here is that having a single loss reserve pool for participating lenders for deed restricted multifamily, market rate multifamily, and commercial properties will allow a single larger loss reserve pool, which presumably will mean that the finance company can take a lot more risks with that much protection and also qualify more customers and hopefully expand benefits to customers through the program. However, one question that we have is that we've heard from some of our participating finance companies that multifamily retrofit projects often go above $200,000, whereas the existing Go Green affordable multifamily regs cap project sizes at $200,000. So one of the questions we have is, we welcome feedback in general on this approach, but in particular, we're wondering, should the loss reserve for deed restricted multifamily be expanded beyond $200,000? And if so, what amount would be reasonable and would help achieve additional approvals or borrower benefits while also protecting and not unreasonably risking ratepayer funds that support this program? Mhm. Moving on, the next change that I wanted to highlight for folks is we are expanding our ability to remove or delist inactive contractors. This is analogous to a change being made with the Go Green Home program. What we have is a formal process whereby we have the option to remove after 1 year of inactivity, we can remove a contractor from being listed on the website, which is not previously described in regulations. And after 3 years of inactivity, we can remove from participation in the program. The purpose of this change is to allow us to have an active list of contractors who will be responsive to customers who are finding them through our website. And we can also keep our list narrowed down to active contractors so that when we have outreach from our program, from our participating finance companies, from other stakeholders, or from customers, then that will help narrow the amount of resources being dedicated to contacting existing contractors. And of course, if a contractor has been delisted or removed from the program, if they decide they want to be reinstated, that is always an option. Another change that we are making that the Go Green Home program already made is adding the ability to use other sources of funding than ratepayer dollars. This is something that we have run into a challenge repeatedly in the program. You can see the utility service territory map on the left here of California. So most of the state are covered by the IOUs that support this program. However, there's a fair portion that is not, especially some population hubs like LADWP and SMUD, for example. So we have requirements right now in the program that projects need to save energy based on fuel provided by an IOU. That means that there's challenges in qualifying projects in those territories that I mentioned. It also means there's challenges qualifying fuel substitution, so electrification. If the customer wants to install a heat pump, but it's not, but the electricity is being provided by a publicly owned utility like LADWP or SMUD, that's a challenge. We can't do that, so that's something that is greater flexibility could benefit the program. We do have some flexibility in that we have this category of non-energy measures that can be up to 30% of the claim eligible principal amount. Getting that credit enhanced financing can be electric measures in a POU territory, so there's some flexibility there. However, a full electrification project would not be able to qualify. And of course, most lenders, customers, and contractors don't really view the world through this map like I've got here on the left of distinctions between IOU and POU jurisdictions. So we are looking at allowing other sources of funding to allow for credit enhancements, just as the program already does. In the case where a measure does not save IOU fuel or is fuel being substituted to a non-IOU source like heat pumps, as I mentioned. And the CPUC approval of a cost allocation methodology will allow us to ensure that ratepayers are not subsidizing these costs. So the modifications we are making to regulations will allow funding to lenders' loss reserve accounts from a non-IOU source, and will allow claims to fund non-IOU measures. We do not currently have an alternate source of funds, but there's potential sources of funding on the table, including federal funds from the GGRF, state funding, or if publicly owned utilities want to participate in the program the same way the IOUs do. We could use these for a loss reserve funding. So we are we're changing regulations to allow expanded eligibility in the case that other sources of funding become available. But the current rules will still stay in place. So some of the changes we're making, we're removing most of the requirements that measures require IOU fuel service. We'll keep one requirement with an exception in place for alternate sources of funding. We're also changing the language throughout regulations to talk about fuel source eligibility separately from IOUs. So we are also making changes by adding a new section to the regulations, which allows loss reserve contributions from non-IOU ratepayer sources or other funding sources, and that will allow other forms of eligible energy measures to qualify for the program. And lastly, I wanted to cover another change. We are adding a new section, once again, analogous to a change made by the GoGreen Home program. This is the possibility of interest rate buydowns. This is something where we have been running a promotion that some of you may have used or been aware of through our program. We are using our marketing dollars right now to do this, but we know that interest rate buydowns are very significant in generating customer interest. People like lower interest rates, they like free money, and we've seen not only with our own program, but in other parts of the country that IRBDs can be very successful in moving projects. So that's something that we are very interested in doing if we can line up a larger source of funding for this. And we would have the same program requirements that we already have to participate in GoGreen Business. However, if another source of funding adds additional requirements, we may fold those in as well. And that brings us to the end of the presentation. We would definitely love to hear from you all on any of these questions we asked or any other questions or comments you have. Oh, Robert's raising his hand. Willie, can you please unmute Robert again?
Yes, you can unmute yourself now.
Thank you. Robert, you're still on mute. Okay.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. So one comment and one question. Comment is on hydrogen. From everything that I've heard, and we haven't done any installations using hydrogen, but from everything that I've heard, things such as microturbines and other technologies, it appears that hydrogen is supposed to be the next holy grail of energy efficiency.
Interesting.
So the comment that you were making, should hydrogen be tied to renewable energy? And my comment on that is no. Don't tie it to anything. And the reason I say that is because if hydrogen is truly the next big thing after LED and advanced controls for HVAC and all these other things, and hydrogen could supplant both electricity and gas. And if that really can happen, and I don't know that the technology is there yet, but everybody seems to be talking about it as being the next thing, then I wouldn't place any restrictions on it. I'd make it as easy as possible for businesses and homes to acquire that technology, if it really is going to be the next best thing to reduce the drain on the grid. So that's my comment about hydrogen. And also,
that's very interesting, because we are looking at financing sourcing of hydrogen, generation of hydrogen through electrolysis. However, we weren't planning on adding measures for hydrogen consuming infrastructure other than the ones that we talked about here. So I would definitely like to follow up with you to see kind of what infrastructure or measures you're thinking of, and also what the ramifications are of allowing other sources, like even a coal burning power plant generating hydrogen could be beneficial, is what you're saying?
Yeah, we're, especially with hotels where you can use a byproduct of a micro turbine, that being heat, to eliminate boilers in a hotel for their, say, heating their swimming pool and their domestic hot water. The when we're talking to customers about purchasing a turbine, maybe solar just won't work there because they don't have the footprint to put in panels or whatever. Then I notice that the engineers always say, yes, we're going to be using natural gas now, but the technology that we're installing is ready for hydrogen when the technology for hydrogen has been perfected to the point where it could actually be used.
Interesting. Yeah, I would definitely like to schedule a follow-up with you to discuss this further.
Sure. And then my next, so that's my comment. Make it as easy as possible for the newest, the quote, newest newest technology to gain prime time in the marketplace. And then, and I'm going to ask you a question you've probably heard 100 times already, and probably have the answer written on a 3x5 card and just hold it up when somebody asks the question again, so you don't have to waste your breath. But when is the quote on bill portion of the various financings, when will that be available?
It's currently active in SoCal Edison territory. SoCal Gas is currently working on it. San Diego Gas and Electric has expressed that they are ready for live projects. So we will have to give that a test run by running some actual live projects through that system. PG&E is currently working on it. It's difficult to predict when they will be available, but they have asked us to run a live project through to begin setting up the customer's account. So when we have on-bill repayment available through all 4 IOUs, we're going to make a big announcement, and I will definitely reach out to you at that time.
Great. If they want a beta test, we can provide a PG&E customer for you.
Yeah, that would be welcome, actually.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, let's connect. Great. Thanks so much, Robert. Looks like Eric has his hand up. Willie, can you please unmute Eric?
Yeah, Eric, you're on mute. Please unmute yourself by clicking the icon of the mic on top of your screen.
Great. Thank you, Jonathan.
Hi, Eric.
Hi. I have a question about interest rate buy down. What did you mean other sources that you may consider other sources of funding? Are you talking private equity? What are the other sources?
Whatever source would allow us to use the funding for interest rate buy downs, we're definitely interested in. Some of my colleagues have pursued U.S. Department of Energy funding for this purpose. But if there are other sources that we are able to secure, we would love to, because as I said, this is very successful. It's been very productive in terms of getting results with customers. So if you have notions of sources of funding that we might be able to use for IRBDs, I would like to discuss it with you.
Great. I have a suggestion. I don't know if it's possible, but it's a suggestion. The actual public benefits tax fund itself, have you considered using the public benefits tax fund and or a portion of that and expanding it into future, as a future strategy? The more and more that the fund is used for interest rate buy down, especially now that measurement and verification, ongoing real-time monitoring, and these things could easily be done with the Internet of Things. It seems to me that that would be a good use of public benefits tax funds.
I'd be very interested in following up with you on this and discussing further along with some of my colleagues who are looking for different sources of funding. So yeah, let's follow up after this call.
Great, thank you.
Thank you. And Robert, I see your hand is still up. If you had said everything you would like to say, you can lower your hand by clicking the same button again. Are there any other questions or comments? Would anyone else like to speak on any of the questions we raised or any others? All right, not seeing any. We definitely would welcome your input. We're moving forward to live regulations fairly soon, so we are going to have a 5-day public comment period. Please submit comments on this round of regulations by end of day Tuesday, April 2nd at 5 o'clock Pacific time. We posted the email and the webpage in the chat. We will be posting a recording of this webinar in addition to the slides from this workshop. And we would very much welcome any comments or questions that you have. And if you would like to set up a follow-up call, we would love to do that as well. Thank you all so much for attending the Go Green Business Workshop, and have a wonderful day.